Our planet is basically a water world. It's covered in these vast, interconnected systems that are always on the move, shaping our climate and really all of life. Today, we're going to dive into the powerful forces behind aquatic biomes and ocean currents. And we're going to start with a pretty strange but totally true story.
So how on earth did 28,000 bath toys manage to travel the entire globe? It sounds like the start of a bad joke, right? But the answer actually tells us something incredible about how our planet works, and it all begins with a storm, way out in the middle of the ocean.
No, really, this actually happened. When a bunch of containers filled with bath toys fell overboard, scientists had this amazing light bulb moment. They realized they had a unique opportunity. By tracking where these thousands of little yellow ducks, green frogs, and blue turtles ended up, they could literally watch the ocean's circulatory system in action, mapping out the invisible rivers that snake their way through our seas.
So that little duck's big adventure wasn't just luck. It was guided by these huge, powerful forces that we call ocean currents. So what exactly is it that makes the world's oceans move?
Yeah, it's not just one single thing. Ocean currents are actually this really complex dance between a few different partners. You've got the push from the wind, the gravitational pull of the tides, the actual weight of the water itself, which changes based on how hot or salty it is, and even the spin of our planet.
So you can basically think of these currents in two big groups. First, you have the surface currents. These are like fast-moving rivers in the top 10% of the ocean, and they're mostly pushed around by the wind. But then you've got the deep ocean currents. These move the other 90% of the water, and they are slow but incredibly powerful. Now, the amazing part is they're not separate. They actually link up to form one single massive system for the whole planet.
And these currents, they do more than just move water around. They're like highways connecting entire environments. And that brings us to this idea of aquatic biomes, the massive watery ecosystems of our planet.
Don't let the word biome throw you off. It's really just a simple way to group ecosystems that have similar climates and life. So when we talk about aquatic biomes, we're talking about everything from a tiny little pond in your backyard all the way to the huge, vast Pacific Ocean.
Okay, so when you look at all the water on Earth, you can split these biomes into two main camps. And it all comes down to one thing: salinity, or just how salty the water is. On one side, you've got freshwater biomes, like rivers and lakes. They have very little salt. On the other side are the marine biomes, like our oceans, which have a much higher salt content. And that one simple difference changes everything, from what kinds of animals can live there to how much life the whole ecosystem can support.
All right, let's circle back to those surface currents for a second. We said they're driven by wind, but what drives the wind? I mean, why does it blow in these really consistent, predictable patterns all across the globe? Well, the answer starts with the sun.
The key to the whole puzzle is a concept called insolation. It's just a word for how much energy from the sun actually hits the Earth. See, because the Earth is a sphere, the sun's rays hit the equator dead on, like a spotlight. But at the poles, that same energy is spread out over a much larger area. This one simple fact, that our planet is heated unevenly, is the engine that drives all of our weather.
And scientists have this really cool model to explain how it all works. It's called the tricellular model. Now, I know it looks a little complicated at first glance, but stick with me. It's basically just a map of how air moves in these three giant loops, or cells, in both the northern and southern hemispheres, and its whole job is to move heat from the hot equator up to the cold poles. Let's just break it down into its three parts. First, you've got the Hadley cell. It's the biggest one, like a massive engine right at the equator, where all that hot, steamy air rises and creates rainforests. Then there's the Ferrel cell, right in the middle. That's where a lot of us live, and it's what causes our crazy, variable weather. And finally, you have the tiny polar cell, which is just a cap of cold, sinking air over the poles.
And here's where you can see it in the real world. This is not just a theory. Take a look at Africa. Right at the equator, where the Hadley cell's air is rising, you get the lush green rainforests. But where does that air come back down? Right around 30 degrees north and south. That sinking air is dry, and what do you find there? The world's biggest deserts, like the Sahara. It's a direct result of this giant air conditioning system.
Okay, so what does this all have to do with the ocean? Well, these huge, predictable winds are constantly dragging across the surface of the water. And because the Earth is spinning, that motion gets twisted, creating these enormous rotating circular currents called gyres. These are the superhighways of the ocean, the very pathways that took those little rubber ducks all around the world.
But remember, that's just the stuff happening on the surface, the top 10% of the ocean. What about the other 90%? For that, we have to go deep, into a system that's even bigger, the global conveyor belt.
The fancy scientific name for this is thermohaline circulation, and the word itself actually gives you the whole story. Thermo, that's for temperature, and haline, that's for salt. It's all about one basic principle. Cold, salty water is heavier, or denser, than warm, fresh water, and heavy things sink.
And this is it. This is basically the planet's circulatory system. You can see the warm surface currents in orange, moving heat away from the equator like arteries. Then, up near the poles, that water gets cold and sinks, forming the deep, cold currents you see in blue, which slowly creep back along the ocean floor like veins. So how does it work? Well, you can think of it like a giant pump, especially up in the North Atlantic. As warm water moves north, it gets really cold. When sea ice forms, it leaves the salt behind, making the water that's left over extra salty and super dense. This heavy water then sinks, plunging thousands of feet to the ocean floor, and pulling all the warmer surface water along behind it. And the scale of this, it's just hard to wrap your head around. This thing moves so slowly. So slowly, in fact, that it can take a single drop of water 1,000 years to make the entire trip around the world.
Now, for thousands and thousands of years, this whole system has been chugging along pretty stable, acting like the planet's thermostat. But now, scientists are getting pretty worried that this ancient, powerful system is in big trouble.
And the problem in a nutshell is melting ice. As the planet warms up, all this fresh water from melting glaciers, especially in places like Greenland, is pouring into the North Atlantic. This flood of fresh water dilutes the ocean, making it less salty and therefore less dense. And that weakens the sinking action that acts as the engine for the whole system.
And the scary part is, this isn't just a computer model. We know this can happen because we've seen it in the Earth's history. Toward the end of the last ice age, a huge lake of melted glacier water basically burst its banks. A massive rush of fresh water flooded the North Atlantic. It shut that pump right off, and the result was catastrophic. The conveyor belt stopped, and Europe was plunged back into a deep freeze for another 1,000 years.
But here's the part that really gets you. The most shocking thing is just how fast this change can happen. We're not talking about something that takes centuries. The geological record shows that this kind of flip from a warm climate to an ice age can happen in as little as a decade.
So all of this leaves us with a really big and honestly a pretty urgent question. We know the planet's climate can flip, and flip fast. As all that ice keeps melting, what we're really doing is running a huge, unplanned experiment with our planet's life support system. How will these ancient currents respond? And more importantly, what is that going to mean for our climate and for our future?